What's going on, y'all? Attorney Tom here with another Work Safe BC reaction video. The video is titled Fuel Tanker Explodes, Fatally Injuring Worker. As many of y'all know, I'm a catastrophic personal injury lawyer located in Texas, and you cannot be a catastrophic personal injury lawyer in Texas without having to deal with refinery and oil industry related incidents. Obviously, here we see that this is a fuel tanker, so we need to find out why it exploded. Was it in transit and was it hit, or were they just trying to load fuel or unload fuel? The thing is, when you're carrying fuel or any other type of chemical or hydrocarbon, these things are very flammable. Literally, static electricity can make the entire thing blow up. So you have tons and tons and tons of procedure and equipment to protect the people and the assets from literally blowing up. Let's watch the video, see what happens, and as always, I will pause and give my analysis about how this would play out in the American legal system. Let's get started.
A driver was transferring gasoline from a tanker trailer to a tanker truck when the gasoline vapors ignited and exploded. The driver sustained fatal injuries. A spark from static electricity likely caused the ignition.
Exactly.
Static electricity is invisible because there are no warning properties. In the presence of a flammable atmosphere, it represents an extreme workplace hazard. Static electricity is generated by hydrocarbon fuels as they flow through hoses and pipes and move around in tanks. Because of their chemical makeup, these fuels can not only generate a static charge, they can store the charge and transfer it to other things. When built up, static electricity can discharge by jumping to the nearest conductor of lower charge, generating a spark, which can ignite a fuel-air mixture.
That's literally all it takes. Think about that. That's the difference between life and death. It is nothing to f around with.
To eliminate or control static electricity, methods including bonding and grounding are used. Bonding uses a conductive material, such as wire, to connect components such as the pump, hoses, and nozzles in a fuel delivery system. This prevents sparks by keeping the charge between components the same. Grounding dissipates the static charge to the earth. At operations where fuel is stored, handled, or transferred, grounding systems are designed and installed by qualified persons. At the incident site, fuel was stored in tanker trailers and a tanker truck. At least 8 months earlier, to facilitate the construction of a concrete block wall, the parking location of the truck and trailers was changed. During the work, the grounding rods at the original parking location were removed. This meant the site had no grounding system.
The site had no grounding system. Issue number 1. Now, as always, remember, fault is a spectrum. It's never black and white. So as we identify all of the issues, I want you to take note of them. And then at the end, I want you to assign a percentage to the incident and what factor caused what percent of the incident. For instance, there's no grounding system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is off the hook. If a reasonably prudent operator under the same or similar circumstances would have not even attempted to transfer fuel because there was no grounding system, was it the operator's fault? Did they have procedures to prevent or have other alternatives than the grounding, such as the bonding? What is the entire deal? I'm rambling on. You get the point. Multiple things can go wrong. Take note of them. Issue 1, no grounding system.
On the day of the incident, the driver had fueled the tanker truck's fuel tanks with diesel pumped out of one of the tanker trailer's compartments using the dispensing hose on the truck. The dispensing hose was non-conductive and was not bonded to the nozzle, pump, or tank. There were no markings on the hose to indicate whether or not it was conductive. The driver needed to transfer gasoline from tanker trailer 1 to the tanker truck for delivery to a customer. The transfer hose was fitted with a bonding wire so that the tanker and truck had the same charge or electrostatic potential. To perform the transfer, the driver could top load or bottom load. Top loading could be done by using the dispensing hose to load the fuel through open access holes on the top of the tanker truck. And bottom loading could be done by connecting the dispensing hose directly to a fuel loading valve, or by connecting a different hose from the 3-position valve to a fuel loading valve. There were 2 safety advantages to bottom loading. First, the system is essentially closed, so almost no oxygen is introduced into the fuel handling and storage system. Second, bottom loading can be done from the ground, with no need for a worker to be on top of the tanker truck. The Employer's Safe Work Procedure, or SWP, for top loading, did warn against splash loading and said that a nozzle extension could be used to avoid it. This is important, as the turbulence created by splash loading generates static charge.
Okay, so issues number 2 and 3. Issue 2 is the driver decided to top load rather than bottom load. How much safer was bottom loading? It sounds like quite a bit safer. Now, would a reasonably prudent operator in the same or similar circumstances have done the same thing? Is it a clear-cut decision to bottom load rather than top load? These are things that if we were working this case, we would have experts give their opinion about, about the industry standard procedures. What did the company direct them to do? Did the company have any standard safety procedures saying, hey, when you have the choice, always bottom load? What the deal is. Issue 3 is the driver did not use the extended nozzle to prevent against splash loading. Again, we are going to defer to the company. Did the company have any procedures in place? The video indicates they were clearly aware of the dangers of splash loading, but how badly did they enforce regulations? Did they have safety equipment? Did they provide the safety equipment? Did they have procedures in place to prevent employees from going rogue?
Generates static charge. The SWP also said to ensure bonding and grounding, but didn't say how to bond. And with no grounding system in place, it wasn't possible for the driver to ground.
Okay, so the mechanism that worked with bonding and grounding, the operator didn't know how to use. He literally could not have used it for grounding because there's no grounding system, but he also didn't know how to use it for bonding because he either wasn't trained and the machine didn't tell him how to use it. Issue number 4, 5, the next issue. Real quick, y'all, before we get back to the video, today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. For whatever it's worth, I have never taken a sponsorship on this channel until now, and that's because I really like the Skillshare product. I myself have taken a few classes since joining the Skillshare community. Most recently, I took Ali Abdal's class about productivity and time management, and Jonathan Van Ness's class about self-care. Yes, self-care. Treat yourself. Come on. I'm not afraid to admit that I take a self-care class. It was awesome. But seriously, y'all, Skillshare is for people who want to learn, whether it's creative writing or professional writing, to public speaking, to self-care, anything you want. There's no ads. You can get down to business and focus on improving yourself. The first 1,000 people to click the link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial to Skillshare so you can start exploring. So check it out if you want, no pressure. Back to the video.
The driver wasn't given any way to check that grounding and bonding were working. The employer's SWPs didn't favor or prohibit any of the top or bottom loading methods mentioned. The driver chose to top load. Although the use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, was mandatory, the driver wore casual clothing and running shoes to perform the transfer. The only pieces of PPE he wore were the gloves.
Okay, so next issue. Wearing PPE was mandatory, but the driver did not wear PPE. And y'all, the reason why I got so squeamish is because burns are quite literally the worst type of injuries, and wearing the correct clothes can be so important. I have a colleague who did a case against a PPE manufacturer where these gentlemen were wearing full burn protection suits, full body suits, but they were defective. And what do you know? They were in an explosion and these suits literally melted to their skin. He was telling me about it at lunch about a week ago. So that's another issue. So if this case went to litigation, would the defense turn around and say, listen, it was the employee's fault for not wearing the PPE. If he had the PPE on, he would have been okay, or the injuries would have been mitigated. He would still be alive with injuries in the following ranges of categories. Again, all of this would require experts and accident reconstructionists and all this kind of stuff. It's just, that's how the real world works.
The driver started the tanker truck and engaged the pumping system. He opened compartment 4, which held diesel, and compartment 3, which was empty. The driver likely displaced the remaining diesel in the dispensing hose into compartment 4 and then began to splash load gasoline into compartment 3. All 3 components needed to start a fire were present: fuel, oxygen, and heat. Gasoline was the fuel. Vapors from it mixed with oxygen from the air. For heat, a spark would be all that was needed to ignite the mixture. And it was identified that the 3 most likely sources of a spark were: 1. The turbulence of splash loading could have generated a charge difference between the nozzle and the tanker, leading to a spark. 2. The static charge created by the flow of gasoline transferred to the nozzle. The nozzle, because it was not bonded to the dispensing hose or the rest of the tanker, was an insulated conductor. This was very hazardous because it could build up a charge and then discharge it to another part of the tanker, leading to a spark. 3. A charge from the driver and his synthetic clothing. There was no evidence that the driver was bonded to the tanker truck during the fuel transfer. Soon after splash loading began, there was an explosion. A fireball rose from the tanker truck. Flames from the ground reached the height of the tankers. There was no fire control system at the site. Workers from adjacent businesses called for emergency services and banded together to fight the fire and help the seriously injured driver.
Next issue. Now that the explosion happened, what tools did they have to mitigate it? They had no fire control system. Again, I'm not really sure where they are, the extent of the site. I'm just pointing out potential issues that would need to be hashed out.
The driver repeatedly asked the workers to close the valves on the tankers. None of the workers knew how, but one shut down the truck's engine. Using handheld extinguishers, the workers put out the fire. Emergency services treated and then transported the driver to hospital.
Look at his shoes, man. Oh my God.
Sadly, he didn't survive. Multiple factors contributed to this incident. The employer, the fuel distribution firm, failed to ensure that the ignition hazard from static discharge was controlled. Specifically, they didn't ensure that systems for bonding and grounding were present.
Yeah, so that's the most fundamental of all things. If you're going to ask an employee, a worker, to do something, they better have all the equipment and procedures necessary to do it and do it safely. Here, they didn't have the equipment for grounding or bonding. It was quite literally impossible for the truck to be grounded. So you're starting this dangerous process already one step behind. I don't know. You're starting it handicapped. I mean, you're just walking in. It's a ticking time bomb, obviously.
Tested for effectiveness, maintained, and regularly inspected at their workplaces. The employer's health and safety program failed to detect and control the hazard. Responsibility for effective bonding and grounding at the work sites was left to the drivers, yet they weren't given a method or equipment to verify it.
There you go. They weren't given equipment or a method to verify grounding and bonding hazards.
Unsafe practices that occurred included splash loading and failing to use the supplied PPE. And
not to be too gruesome, but the case I was talking about just then, they were suits just like this, but they were defective. They literally melted to those guys.
PPE and to deploy guardrails. Supervision was inadequate. Observations or evaluations of the driver in the field weren't done for nearly a year before the incident. Safety inspections were not conducted at the site at the frequency specified in the safety program.
So they had a safety program, yet they disregarded it. This happens all the time in real life cases. You see these companies that have these robust safety procedures, which means that they know that there's a threat, yet they fail to enforce and follow the procedures, or they instill a culture where it is okay for employees to ignore the procedures.
The inspection process didn't check that effective bonding and grounding was in place. Senior management didn't detect and/or correct these oversights. More issues at this site included that the driver worked alone during the fuel transfer. There was no fire control system at the site. The employer hadn't ensured that assistance would be readily available during an emergency. They also failed to inform the local fire department that bulk fuels were being handled and stored for extended periods at the parking lot. The control of sparks during top loading depended on the consistent following of safe work procedures. When that didn't happen, an explosion and fire resulted. For such a serious hazard, relying only on procedures to protect workers isn't enough. A higher level of protection is necessary. Here, it meant engineering controls, as in effective bonding and grounding systems.
I'm going to screenshot this. This is a good chart. That's exactly right. Procedures are great and they're helpful and they save lives, but it's not enough when people are dealing with inherently dangerous things. You need some systematic level of safety, some fail safes, some contingencies.
Systems. Having those likely would have made all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's the little things. I mean, let's just say everything goes to shit and this whole thing blows up and this guy's burning, okay? If you have fire equipment there, you might be able to put out the fire quick enough so he doesn't die. And obviously that's an extreme example. I don't know if that would have saved this individual in this particular situation, but you get the point. All right, y'all, that's it for the video. So down below, I want you to write all the factors that you identified and assign percentages to them. That actually helps me a lot because it makes me understand what y'all think, and perhaps it'll make me be a better lawyer. I hope it makes me be a better lawyer. I think these videos make me be a better lawyer. So I love watching them with you. I love the support that the community has given. I think we just passed 423,000 subscribers, which is absolutely crazy. And again, as always, if you have any suggestions, comments, concerns, please let me know down below in the comments. I'm always looking for video ideas. I'm always looking for things to react to. The goal of this channel is to make content worthy of your time. So thank you so much for watching. See y'all soon. Bye.